Welcome, everybody. Good evening. You all know how I know it's time to start. I hear the beautiful Breslin bells. So I just want to say welcome. I'm Susan Askew. I'm class of 86 of the college, and I'm Associate Vice President for Alumni and Parent Programs. And I just love getting together with you all this way. It's a great opportunity for us to connect and share some news about Sewanee. And we're joined tonight by Lauren Goodpaster. She's Associate Dean for Campus Life, and David Chips, who's Acting Vice President for Risk Management, and he's also the Director of the Babson Center for Global Commerce, and I have forgotten to introduce him as our University Marshal as well. So thank you, David, for being here. And then, of course, our Vice Chancellor, who is so willing to spend this time with you all. So many of you submitted questions ahead of time, and what I thought I'd do was just start with some, and then we'll let each person kind of give us a little update. But first, for you, Vice Chancellor, it's been about 2 weeks since we've been together with the parents, and there's just been a lot of good, positive changes and updates since then. And so I just wanted to see if you would just share some good news with us.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody, or afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm delighted to have a chance to speak with you again. Good news is that we are we're on the downside of the mountain, as we say. We can see the end of the semester. And our plan for keeping everybody safe, which is our #1 priority, has been implemented pretty successfully. Touch wood. You never know what's exactly around the corner, but our team and the students have all pulled together marvelously well. And that's all great news. I'm also, and we all are also aware that folks are tired. You know, we're sort of, it's like, it's mile, 13 of a marathon right now. And we know that it's challenging for a lot of folks. And so as results for that, we have some things up our sleeve to help our community say thanks to everybody. We have a gratitude celebration that'll be held on the quad tomorrow with food and pizza and ice cream and live bands and hot air balloon rides too, I think, Laura, is that right? Somebody told me hot air balloon rides.
Tomorrow is the raffle for students to be able to go on the hot air balloon rides in a couple of weeks. Yes.
Sure. Sorry. Thank you very much.
No, that's all right.
Plus
something else to look forward to.
Exactly. So plus some other cool stuff that's coming down the pipe. We are confident enough now in our COVID protocols that we have doubled the allowable size for outdoor events from 50 to 100, with all the other associated protocols having to apply. And so we're making it, and we are learning as we go, and that's all good news.
Yes, it is. So the Greek-like activities are expanded, and even any other event on campus is, if it's university sponsored, I understand it's unlimited how many people can gather. So that is some really, really good news. Last time we were able to share news about the spring calendar and when school would return in February. And I just wondered if there were any updates about that, as far as when students will know their course choices, and when, of course, athletics is a big topic, and if you know any more about that, and what the world might look like as far as the restrictions being lifted or not next semester. Any updates you can give us?
Sure. Well, you all hopefully will receive the academic calendar for the spring now, and so you know that we will start in classes on February 1st. There will not be a spring break, but there will be reading days built in to allow folks to have a bit of a break, and then for us to be able to conclude the semester on time so that everyone has the summer, both our students and faculty and staff. So it's very important. With regard to what restrictions are going to look like, The good news is that we have, and I'll let David Chips talk a bit more about this, but we're going to open our own lab right here on campus, which will allow us at a minimum to have redundancy in our testing capability, and best case scenario allow us to double the amount of people that we're able to test in any given day. And that's fantastic news, because testing is the absolutely essential component to allow us to open and remain open safely. What we have recognized that works thus far, I don't want to claim victory too soon yet, but we definitely can see it. The testing is essential. The community health guidelines with regard to masking and distancing have proven essential. The bubble works. And if anything, I think what we're learning is that we can have greater flexibility inside the bubble so long as we can ensure that the bubble is increasingly tight in terms of people not leaving and in terms of others coming in. It's true that we have not had so far a documented transition from a faculty member to a student or vice versa. That's very important for a host of reasons. And we've only had 16 positive cases. And that's just extraordinary. I mean, when I talk to my fellow ACS presidents and they're thrilled they've only had 200 or 300 cases so far, it's really, really extraordinary what we've been able to do in this regard. With regard to athletics, our conference presidents all met last week. We have agreed to a tentative schedule for sports in the spring. I will tell you my view, and I know it's one that is shared by some of my other presidents, is that if we're going to have intercollegiate competition, then we simply have to be able to ensure every athlete is tested, and every athlete simply has to be masked while they're competing, with the exception of swimming, maybe golf. But everybody else, certainly basketball, football, wrestling, I mean, they all have to be able to mask while they're competing. I mean, as I say, we have to be able to test. The fact that we're able to test everybody once a week, and then when we have our own lab, we'll be able to even increase that frequency for some of our students and faculty is extraordinary. When I talk to some of my other colleagues, first of all, I don't know of any another comparable university to us that's able to do that. I mean, certainly nowhere else in the ACS region is able to do it. That's the Association of Colleges of the South, ACS, and many others are hoping for the advent of another testing regime that is a fraction of what is currently available on the market. I'm not confident that that's going to become available, but we'll see. And so those are the things on which an intercollegiate competitive athletics season will depend.
So while we're talking about athletics, would that include fall sports that didn't take place? Would those all lump into the spring?
Yes, that's correct, essentially.
And then have y'all talked about, would spectators be able to come to watch?
No, almost. Again, same issue with regard to protecting the bubble. And let me say this: we're all tired of this. We all wish this were just over and done. I absolutely feel it. We wish that we could, go back to life as normal. We wish that we could sort of come back. We're just not there. We're just not. We are, as a country, are entering essentially the third wave of this. The state of Tennessee is amongst 41 states in the country where the rate of the virus is increasing. Here in the Tri-County area where we occupy, Grundy County, our neighboring county, is one of the hottest hotspots in the entire state of Tennessee, and it's where an awful lot of our staff come from. We're not past this. We're just not. And so we have to continue to do what is necessary to keep everybody safe, even as we try to figure out how we get to as much of a communal life for our students while they're here as possible.
Great. Before I go to the next subject, we're sort of talking about the calendar in the spring. I think that we know when students will be able to select their courses, and do you know what the balance will be like versus how they were this year as far as being in person or virtual?
Sure. Well, let me say that the reason why some were in person and some were virtual is entirely due to the discretion of the professors. we have a number of professors, as you might imagine, that either have underlying pre-existing conditions or otherwise are in high-risk categories by virtue of age or other sorts of things. And so as we were all trying to figure out the safest way to resume in-person classes, there were a number of professors, about a third of them, that just made the decision that they were not comfortable teaching in person, and that therefore led to their classes being completely virtual. We are in discussions now as we plan for the spring semester with a number of them, and we are hopeful that as they see the extraordinary success we've had in controlling the virus, that we'll be able to encourage more of them to teach in person as well.
Great, thank you. So I want to move to the general category of COVID and just maybe get an update from David Ships. There's been a lot of questions about, have we changed our rule about parent visitors now that we're allowing prospective students to visit? And I'm just going to let you, David, give a little update, and I'll pose some questions to you if you don't cover them in what you say.
Right. Thank you, Susan. And hello to all of you. Thank you for tuning in. I'll give you an update. So we are continuing, as you know, to test our students each week. We have an extraordinarily low rate of positivity, 0.1% since the beginning of the semester. It's something that is working quite well. There are 6% of universities nationwide that are testing all students each week, and we are one of them. And as you can imagine, the balance of that group is probably a very well-resourced, much larger institution than we are. And so the investment that we're making and the strategy that we're deploying, a student-first strategy specific around ensuring that we have on-campus education, is, continues to work well. We are fortunate in many ways, and the students have certainly developed that muscle memory about testing on a specific day of the week. And that has boded well for us. As the Vice Chancellor mentioned, we look forward to opening up our lab probably late this year, certainly in January, and that will be the lab that will be processing the tests when students return in late January. The benefits of doing so are numerous. In addition to the near and present need to test for COVID, we will have a lesser expense profile with controlling our lab testing on campus. The speed with which we'll be able to deliver results will be literally as fast as they come off the machines. And it also gives us optionality as it relates to utilizing the lab for a number of other purposes, including for our own wellness center and then potentially even third parties. And so it's a very exciting development for us that if you haven't already seen it on the website, you should definitely take a look at it. It is going to be led by two of our biologists on faculty, Dr. Summers and Dr. Smith. And so all around good news in that regard. As it relates to the policies, sort of the infrastructure of policies that we have in place with regard to mobility and with regard to movement on and off campus, I mean, I think the short answer continues to be that what we have put in place is working. There is certainly outcomes related to certain positive cases that can be traced back to movements off of campus. And so I think that what we are encouraging students to do as it relates to everything being on campus for all of these reasons, it just this late in October continues to be a successful tactic and strategy. It is not an indication that the rules should change. In fact, our success is directly tied to the fact that what we have in place is are the measures. Are they different from what everybody is used to? Certainly. Do we all ache for I won't even use the word normal, but a more traditional existence on a college campus, on this beautiful campus? Absolutely. But I know, and my office just happens to be situated right next to our test site, and I talk to streams of students Monday through Friday as they go back and forth to test, not only to thank them for what they're doing to support what we're doing, but also to take their temperature on everything about how the campus is operating through the semester. And so, we continue to be thankful for their encouragement and support of everything that we're doing. And as Dean Codepasture will elaborate on this evening, no doubt, there's some great things to anticipate that are in the category of just our way of saying thanks and recognizing what they are doing this semester to help us be successful. Susan, what else can I elaborate on within all of that?
Great, that was a good update. But so do you know, if we were to get a vaccine, would we require that for our students? And would that change the way that the policies are?
It's a good question. I would say that, and this is not an attempt to punt, it is just so early to tell. And I don't think any of us have really a good line of sight as to not only the availability of a vaccine at scale, but also what the conditions are under which that vaccine is administered, how other institutions of higher education may or may not embrace it as a means to stop testing or change how the experiences on campus are designed. I think it's one of those bridges that we'll cross when we get there. And I'll give you an example. There were a number of tactics that we had in place with regard to the arrival of students in August. We had, some of you may remember, we had thought about using an app on a smartphone for students to self-report their health conditions. We were going to take temperatures as students entered the classroom and as they left their dorms. And we had a lot of these measures that were incremental to testing, and we were not going to test students every week. And essentially, we made the call as it became readily apparent by consulting with subject matter experts and also adhering to the CDC guidance, which basically boiled down to test as much as you possibly can. And that has turned out to be our strategy. And so, as you may know, we abandoned those kind of companion efforts, which were logistically intense, very, very early on in the semester, like literally the first week, to focus all of our energies and all of our efforts on testing. And there's an enormous number of people here who are dedicated to fulfilling that task, who are doing two jobs at once to ensure that that lone strategy, which has proven to be the right one, continues to be successful.
Great. Dr. Brigety, I'd like to ask you a question that a parent posed, and they said, what do you think the students have learned from all of this? I mean, I know we are an institution of higher education and always promoting lifelong learning, but what do you think our students are learning from all this?
Well, I'll tell you what I hope they've learned. I hope they've learned a greater degree of resilience. We're a big scouting family, my wife and boys and I actually have just volunteered to become the scoutmaster for the local scout troop here. Just both my boys are members. And one of the things I would always tell scouts is that, doing hard things teaches you that you can do hard things. And life is not always as we would wish it to be, and cards get dealt to us that are not fair. But if it's possible to get through tough times with grit and grace, and that's what we're trying very hard to model and invite students to be part of that. And I very much hope that's a lesson that they're taking.
Great. Lauren, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Can you just share some updates? There's some wonderful things that you all have planned for the students to do. A lot of parents are wondering, what else can students do besides sit in their dorm room?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the Vice Chancellor inspired everyone to celebrate how far we've gotten. And so tomorrow he will be hosting and helping us host a gratitude gathering. I think he mentioned that. We are bringing Mountain Goat Pizza, which is a student favorite. We have a student band. We'll have an ice cream truck. Dining is doing a lot of snacks. So it will be a lot of fun, and the weather looks perfect. So grateful for that. Next Friday night, we are hosting a music event in the village at Angel Park with a student band and some other forms of entertainment, and Blue Chairs getting involved. So we're excited about that. The next weekend, which is the weekend of November 6th, that is when the hot air balloon rides that we will raffle tomorrow will take place, along with some other things along with that. So in addition to those special events, we have weekly events at Craven's, late night at Craven's on Friday and Saturday nights. Those so far have been, we've had bluegrass music, we've had movies, we've had a stress relief art night, Friday night, Student Life we are hosting, and we have rather large pumpkins and paint, and we're going to do pumpkin painting, and all of these late night events at Craven's are substance-free events, and they have food and snacks, which those have been a hit for our students. We've opened the SUT back up. Many of y'all know the SUT is our Sewanee Union Theater, and we hate for our community members who also love the SUT, but right now it's only open for our students, and it's open free of charge. Normally there is a charge to go to the SUT, but free of charge for students to go enjoy a movie and some candy that we're also handing out. Most of y'all know the Wellness Commons is open. That is full to the brim. Students are signing up for their workout times, and they're offering a lot of classes and opportunities as well. I recently shared this, but our Sewanee Outing program has seen an incredible increase of participation. Last year at this point in the semester, they had offered 56 trips out and around on the domain. So far this year, they've increased that to 81 trips. And so far this year, they've served about 1,100 of our students, which is 439 more students than at this point last year. So I think that's incredible, because students who, if there wasn't a pandemic, they might not have thought to participate in SOP and to get out and to see the 13,000 acres that we have. So we're excited about that and the good work that SOP does.
Lauren, can I intervene on
yeah, please.
I have heard this critique directly from students or from parents that there is literally nothing to do other than sit in your room. I honestly don't understand where that's coming from, because I know how hard our Dean of our Student Life folks are working, as well as all the other student organizations that are constantly doing things all around campus. And Lauren, I think this is right. So all the software that all of your students use to manage all their classes is called Brightspace.
Correct.
And we have now essentially have a weekly calendar of everything that is happening all around the domain on Brightspace. So
Correct.
It literally could not be any easier for your students or others to just kind of go point and click and see the plethora of things. I'm so glad Lauren talked about the Sewanee Outdoor Program. I'm actually going camping with them this Saturday.
Oh, good, good.
My pack, and we're going to go off, and it's, I think, a beginning camping trip for some of the others. So I was like, it'll be fun. And so there's just so many things happening. And I would, if your student is telling you that there is nothing to do here, I would encourage you to challenge them to actually go ask, because there's actually a ton happening.
Absolutely. And tell your students to come find me, because I will gladly sit down with them, grab some coffee with them, and talk to them about ways to get involved. One of my favorite things to do is to meet up with students at Sterling's and help get them connected. So, so we have a lot of those programs and events and activities going on. Susan, if I have a couple minutes, if I could just share some other updates about some services that we've also started to offer, because these, I think, were questions from past webinars. We now have something called Sewanee Shops. I can't remember if last time we all got together, if that had been launched yet or not, but twice a week we have Student Life staff who volunteer to drive down and pick up Walmart orders. The general manager of the Walmart here in town has been really great to work with, and they pull together all the Sewanee orders and have them ready for us so that we can go down and pick up all the orders for students and then bring them back up, and the students just come to the Bishop's Common to pick up those orders. So that's been well received by our students. The other thing that that I think is worth mentioning is we just launched a donation drive for supplies. We have a lot of students who have fallen under some financial hardship because of the pandemic. And so I've partnered with the Community Action Committee, which is known probably most for its food bank out of Odie Parish, but I've partnered with them along with our Bonner and Canali programs on campus out of Civic Engagement. And we have started a donation drive for just basic supplies, shampoo, soap, feminine products, deodorant. And the response has been overwhelming. We have collection points around campus and then one at Odie Parish. And so the CAC is going to expand from not just a food bank, but also for personal supplies. And what we're going to do is the community already goes to the food bank, the community in need, but we're going to open up special hours for students so that students will have some more discretion and privacy to be able to go and get what they need as well. So we're very excited about that and plan to continue that post-pandemic as well. One more thing, if I have time. Okay, thanks. I know a question that that we had gotten is what are y'all doing to make sure that first year students in particular are that they're able to connect and meet people. So I actually talked with my colleagues in residential life today and wanted to hear a little bit more about what they're doing in the halls. We already know that proctors are doing extra outreach, especially to our first year students, even if that's just a, knock on the door, ask how they're doing. So there's more regular check-ins than I think in a typical semester. Our proctors are also, they've been encouraged and they're planning on all of these special events that we're having to knock on doors and encourage people to walk over with them so that they can go together as a hall. The one thing that I was really excited to hear that I didn't even know was happening is some of our halls have freshmen and upper class students in them. And so they've started a mentor-mentee type program where some of the older students are paired with the freshmen in the hall so that they've got somebody that, they can talk to and ask questions. So those are just a few things that we're doing. We know we can always do more, but we recognize that especially for our first year students, this is difficult. It's a lot harder to meet somebody during a pandemic when we're all wearing masks and we have to stay a little bit further apart from one another. But Res Life is working very hard to make sure that our new students are connecting as best as possible.
Great. And while you were talking to Residential Life, we seem to have a lot of questions about the move out in November. And we know students had to sign up for their time to move out. And I don't know if parents are worried about a lot of people being here at once or wondering if they have more freedom in selecting their time. But they're wondering do you know if the move out is going to be staggered like move in was?
Students are able to move out that Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So it is staggered over that 3-day period. If a student needs to leave early, they can reach out to Residence Life to see if they can get an early move out date. Those are the 3 staggered days. So it won't be everybody on campus just on Friday or just on Saturday or just on Sunday. It is being staggered. But if for some reason, travel necessity, students need to leave early, they can work with Res Life. Susan, you're on mute.
Sorry, all that sounds wonderful. Thank you. So now, Vice Chancellor, there have been a lot of questions about infractions on campus and discipline and the police's role in all that. And I heard you just give a great answer on this topic, and I'd like you to address that a little bit.
Sure. Well, let me, it's a big topic. But let me kind of offer several thoughts, and I'm happy to continue to talk about it if I'm not answering what you want. So first of all, the purpose of our police is to keep everybody safe. And it's also very important to understand that our police are not security guards. They are sworn officers of the law in Franklin County in the state of Tennessee, not unlike any other police officers that you find in any other community. And so, as you clearly know, we had a massive uproar at the very beginning of the semester with regard to the enforcement of the existing, predating my arrival, existing zero tolerance policy with regard to drugs. And so, as a result of that, we pivoted and said, fine. We're actually two entities here, the University of the South and the Municipality of Sewanee, and those merge in my office as both Vice Chancellor and Mayor of Sewanee. And so we will have a moratorium on all university student conduct misdemeanor infractions with regards to drugs and alcohol until we have a community conversation that makes a recommendation to our regents about what our drug and alcohol policy approach ought to be. And that's where we are right now. So no student, since I think about the second week of school, maybe the third, but no student has been received any university sanction for a misdemeanor drug or alcohol offense. That's correct, Lauren, isn't it? Yeah. Now, the laws of the state of Tennessee still apply. They applied before, they apply now. And our students are subject to them just as they would be in any other place in the state and just as anyone else in the state would be. And so the rule is that if you are involved in a plain sight violation of alcohol possession, if you're underage for drinking, or narcotics, regardless of your age are, if it's a misdemeanor, you'll be cited. And if it's a felony, meaning you are dealing drugs, you absolutely will be pursued by the police, and you'll be sent home pending the legal resolution of that case if it's a felony. Now, notwithstanding what the students are hearing and what kind of goes on in the rumor mill, it's also true. A couple of things are true. We've had 6 felony arrests of students in the first 6 weeks of school, felonies, for quite serious drug and alcohol related events, to include both possession as well as DUIs. And a number of other students that have been cited for multiple serious misdemeanors, really quite serious things. We have had a smaller number of students that were cited for underage drinking in plain sight, or because they were having an unauthorized party, for example, in Abel's Alley. Here's the thing. We have been trying very hard to have dialogues with our students, with Greek Life, with others, about the nature of the framework as it is, and also about their responsibilities. They are not kids, they are adults. Young adults, absolutely, but adults nonetheless. And the number one rule of adulting is that you are responsible for your actions under any circumstance. And so to make the decision to be on the opposite side of the law is a grown-up adult decision. And so we have nevertheless been working very hard for our police chief to engage various student groups, to have conversations, to help explain where we are. And then finally, I will also say that just this week, after consultation with the regents, I've authorized the creation of something we're calling ACAN, or the Advisory Committee on Alcohol and Narcotics, which will be comprised of representatives from essentially every constituency in Sewanee. That will begin their work before the end of this semester and work through the break to make both to educate themselves about the extent of narcotics use and illegal drinking and excessive drinking, and to come up with a framework that can have consensus in the broad community and that makes sense for us and that can be presented at least as a first draft to the regents in February. So that's where we are, and if I didn't answer any particular questions, I'm more than happy to try to circle back to make sure I've gotten what you all would hope to know.
Great. Now that covers a lot of it, but person says they've asked me this 3 times and I failed to ask it to you or to David, but are the police being tested, and how often, and are they supposed to follow the masking rules?
Yes. Yes and yes. And so the police are tested weekly. There are 11. So we did not start testing them weekly, but we have started testing them weekly. And at a higher level, as it relates to testing any employee and the police are in a bit of a different category. Our focus is primarily on any individual, any employee, faculty, or staff that has a very high likelihood of close proximity with students on a regular and consistent basis. And as you can imagine, there are a number of employees who just simply don't interact with students at all, but there are many that do. And if you look at the dashboard that is published on sewanee.edu, every single week you can, by hovering your mouse over, you can see exactly how many employees that we've tested. We're very transparent about the number of employees that are testing. The breakdown of positives, thank goodness they are low, but the breakdown between students and employees that are positive. And so we are as transparent as we can be with regard to the data, because we think it's important. And it's a demonstration of how we're going about this. So I hope that helps.
Susan, let me actually add one of the things. I saw one of the questions in the chat. The police seem to be, and make sure you read it directly, so I'll make sure I get it right. The police seem to be arresting en masse. Is it a question of guilt by association? I'm just going to continue to come back to this because I think it's so important to make sure that the information is clear. The only two things, first of all, it is factually, categorically false that our police are arresting people en masse. The two things that get people arrested are if they are in commission of a felony, which is a charge of a serious crime, or if their arrest is necessary for the purpose of ensuring safety. For example, let's say somebody is like swinging wildly as a fighter, is having sort of a bad drug trip or something like that, then they might be arrested in order to secure them. Because to arrest somebody means you're physically in custody of the police and they are therefore responsible for your safety. It has happened a few times this semester, but in every case, and I get the police reports every single morning. I am in daily contact with our Director of Public Safety and Security, and we have a weekly one-on-one. And so I can promise you, every single time a student is put in handcuffs, I am personally made aware of it, of all the circumstances surrounding it. And in every single case, that is because there was a student who was commissioned a felony or that was otherwise a danger to himself or somebody else. And that's why they're taking into custody.
Great, thank you for clearing all that up. I'd like to move on to what do you think the morale is amongst the students, and maybe talk about some of the things that our wellness center is providing.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think it's all over the map, to be honest. You know, I had a student write me the other day, "Hey, VC, everything at Sewanee sucks and it's all your fault." It's like, all right, let's unpack that a bit and kind of see where we mean. And then I was at church the other weekend and at All Saints. And after the service, I came across about a half dozen young ladies who just couldn't be happier to be here, and were just so thankful and are so proud of their university that was able to stay open when so many others weren't. And we see it all. I think universally, does everybody wish that things were the way they were before the pandemic? Absolutely. But we see a real mix. I would tell you just anecdotally. Lauren, I'd be interested in your view on this. I think some of the younger students are struggling a bit more than some of the older ones. I think from some of the data we're seeing from our counseling services, interestingly, it's actually a lot of young men that are coming in and being seen, certainly at rates that they were greater than they were before. I think a lot of the seniors and juniors absolutely want to be able to graduate. And look, these are gross generalizations, and you could find somebody who doesn't fit in any one of these categories who is the opposite of what I've described. But if you're asking kind of for macro trends, that's what I see. Lauren, do you have additional viewpoints?
Yeah, I would just echo exactly what you just said. I think it's all over the board. I talk to students who say this is their favorite semester ever at Sewanee. And then there's definitely some that are struggling. like I mentioned with Res Life, you know, we're trying to think of new and creative and innovative ways to connect our first year students. Thankfully, we have really such strong programs like Pre that SOP offers and FYP. So they've got some connections, and we continue to reach out to those student leaders to help connect our first year students. And our wellness center has been offering not only just the typical one-on-one counseling, but they're doing a lot of workshops on resiliency and grit and meditation and just ways to find just calm and peace amidst a world that is not. So.
Great, thank you guys.
Let me actually ask one, go back to one of the things I know this Ms. Harris wrote again with regard to question about mass misdemeanor citations. Let me just kind of come back and say this. From the perspective of the university, given the moratorium we have in place, you could not be more liberal, meaning not left, right, Republican, Democratic, meaning that you could not, we could not have a more permissive environment right now. If your student was 18 years old and drinking a martini on the steps of All Saints Chapel, they would not be cited at all by the university for their conduct for a misdemeanor drug or alcohol infraction until we come to a conclusion about where we want to be. And they are subject to the law as would be any other citizen in the state. The law applies to them. It's that simple. Now, our police are not going around looking for people that are underage drinking. They have lots of other things to be doing. But with regard to what I know some of you have heard with regard to this past weekend, when a number of students were freshmen, almost all of them, were cited for underage drinking, it is because that they were all at an unauthorized party in the woods in Abo's Alley, and somebody called in a Live Safe, which is the app that we have for members of the students and others to be able to report concerns about unsafe activity. The police responded to that Live Safe, came across this large group. There was trash everywhere. Almost all of them were drinking, and almost to a person, they were all underage. And so I'll come back and say this again. Until we come to some different modus vivendi, and even then, people are responsible for their actions. It's simple. And so if they want to make the adult decision, or to put it differently, they will not be cited if they don't break the law. It's simple. And so it's up to them to make a decision about where they want to be. And my hope is that as we move forward as a community, we will have a much more robust education process, as well as a framework that is consistent with the law and that has broad-based buy-in, so we can figure out where we need to be.
Great, thank you. Okay, I want to move it back a little bit to the move out. And I heard you, Vice Chancellor Brigety, explain this where it made total sense, but to a lot of people it doesn't, that their students have to completely move out of their dorm. Can you maybe explain that?
Yes, I was reading one of the other questions in the chat. So when we had to evacuate the mountain, just before I arrived as Vice Chancellor, we had to evacuate the mountain this past spring on an emergency basis to get everybody out because the COVID pandemic was just starting. Almost everybody left their things here. And it was a Herculean effort for our staff to pack up the belongings and send them home to many of our students, and or to be able to be present when they came back to retrieve their goods in person, which we try to do on a reasonable schedule as possible, but given everyone's individualized circumstances, it was not chaos, but it was approaching it. And it was a massive lift for our staff. And so we are planning for everybody to return on time on February 1st. We believe that we will be able to pull that off. We have no one in living memory has ever run a residential college or university in the midst of a global pandemic during flu season. The flu season that we don't yet know how bad it's going to be. And as we all know from our experiences, some seasons are worse than others. And so we have to make reasonable preparations to be flexible if the nature of the conditions in our country, in our state, in our region prevent us from coming back on time on February 1st, much as though we expect that to happen. Further, even assuming that conditions are generally true for the vast majority of our students to come back on February 1st, we don't know if your particular student will be able to come back, because your particular student may very well contract the virus while she or he is at home, talking to their buddies that went to University of Alabama that has, a couple thousand documented coronavirus cases, or wherever else. And so if you take that one particular case and you multiply it by 1,700 people, we're back to where we were in the spring and the challenges of that. And so while I recognize that it is an individual inconvenience for individual people to have to move out of their dorms, it is the best macro answer in order to avoid many of the challenges that we simply had no choice other than to face when we had to evacuate in a hurry last spring. And that's why we're requiring everybody to move out.
Perfect, great. I hope this is a quick question, but it's kind of about timing for two things, but they're related because I think parents think their student may make a decision about returning in the spring based on these. But I think it's December, but I'm not sure if it's for both of them. But do you know when we will know when students can register and when the decision will be made about spring sports?
So the decision about spring sports is not entirely up to us, because we make that decision in consultation with the other presidents in our conference. We expect that we will be able to make a decision on and around December 1st, although I can't promise that, because it depends on what the collective decides. Lauren or David or Susan, do you know this precise date for when deposits are due?
So I can add a little color to that, Dr. Brigety. So because the date, as we understand it currently, and again, it's the last few days of October, because the date that the conference will hand down sort of a direction for all of us is a bit fluid. It could be the case that deposits that are ordinarily due December 1st may shift to later in the calendar year to accommodate that. And we're trying to nuance that real time as more information is available. So I hope that answers the question.
And I should say that's exactly what we did this past summer, if you recall, because we actually moved the deposit date by a couple of weeks because we still had a fair amount of uncertainty about some other issues. And so we will certainly sort of take that on for consideration and be as flexible as we can.
Great. As long as we're talking about dates, I know that we have announced the commencement date due to the start of the semester. We've had to move both for the class of 20 and class of 21. And I realize a lot of parents won't care about this, but is there any news to share about that?
Sure. Well, let me start with the macro question, because I know I've heard from a few parents who had already booked homes at the assembly or otherwise based on what we thought the dates were going to be before we announced the spring calendar date, the dates for the spring. Let me just say that I understand that frustration. I do generally regret it. But all of our thinking with regard to planning is focused by what is first and foremost required for safety based on the pandemic. And so, for example, we actually have a certain number of days that we simply have to be in school by our accreditation. And further, a huge part of our success in our strategy so far this fall is that we've been able to take advantage of the outdoors for classes, in outdoor tents or discussion groups, for social activities, etc. That is going to be inverted in the spring when it is colder at the beginning of Easter term and then gradually gets warmer. And so what we don't yet know, first of all, we don't know what the prevailing weather is going to be, although we know it's going to be colder than it is right now. And the second thing we don't know is how cold is too cold to be outside. Because if you get to a point where basically, yeah, you're having classes outside the tent, but you have the tent flaps down, and you've got a heater in, then you've kind of essentially lost the health benefits of being outside, right? You may as well be inside. And also crucially, having talked with our students and others, we understood that the two things. One, that it was absolutely imperative that we keep the summer intact. From Memorial Day, because we typically have an earlier summer anyway, but at least from Memorial Day to Labor Day, that we keep that intact for students to be able to do whatever it is they're going to do over the summer, for our professors to be able to do that as well. And we also understood that students wanted to minimize the amount of mandatory online classes possible. So for example, we could have said, we're going to keep the graduation dates in early May as is, but we're going to start on time in January, but we're going to have online classes for the first month, and then people will move in. And we heard loud and clear that's not what students wanted to do. And so in order to thread that needle with on the back end, preserving the summer, on the front end, avoiding a mass mandatory online classes, and be able to meet, to take advantage of the outdoors so it's warm enough, kind of, to start, but then also meet our days in class requirements by our accreditation. The best we come up with was starting classes on February 1st, ending, I think, around May 16th. They're about eliminating spring break. But the other thing we also heard loud and clear is that students needed rest days built in. And so if you're having a day of rest, that's a day you're not having in class, which means you get to figure out how to sort of build it in elsewhere. And that's how we sort of came up with the graduation dates for the class of 21 and class of 20 as advertised in the calendar.
Great. And as far as we know, we're planning to have this in-person event of commencement for both classes. And for families who have those questions, we'll go with a normal commencement schedule with baccalaureate on Saturday, commencement on Sunday. And we realize the accommodations situation can be challenging. And so just if you're having trouble with your move of the ones that you have arranged and you can't meet the new date, just let me know. I've got a list that is just so overwhelming that we can try to find you, get that all worked out for you. One more for you, Lauren. Without our crystal ball, how do you think we'll have rush in the spring?
Yes, we will. Right now, our IFC and ISC councils are working on the rush plans. It might not look like the rush we've ever known. In fact, it's likely to be virtual. They played around with some parts of rush this fall being virtual, and it actually worked very well. So the students were encouraged. So it will likely be virtual, but it will happen.
Great, great. I've got one more question for Dr. Brigety, but before we go, I just want to say that it looks like we need to do a little follow-up. A lot of people are very interested in the donations that Lauren mentioned, that project going on, and also lots of little detailed questions about move out. So we'll probably get you a sheet that has all those frequently asked questions on it. Also, there's been a question about parking, and we'll try to get that to you and see how we progress with any news about athletics. But so I want to wrap up with you, Vice Chancellor, and just, I don't know if our parents realize this, but this is the first time we've had a family living in Chen Hall. And you're joined with your wife, Dr. Leela Selassie, and your two sons. And I'd love for the families to hear about your family.
Sure, they're all doing fine, and that's great. And so, but if I may, Susan, there are a couple of things here that I see that I really want to try to drill down on. So I don't want anybody to leave to feel as if we're not answering questions or dodging them. And quite frankly, Lauren and David, you're dismissed if you'd like to, but I'm happy to stay on a bit longer to folks that need answers. So, two things in particular. One, as I said, we have built-in rest days into the spring semester. They will be there. It was clear in the calendar we built for this fall that we would not have rest days. We didn't yank them maliciously at the last minute. They were built into the academic calendar that was promulgated. But we also clearly learned that students really need it. Right, and so there are a lot of things that all of us are learning as we go through, and so we want to make sure that that's the case. With regard to the question about why parents can't come and visit their students, let me try to explain the logic behind this. So the center of gravity for protecting the students from spread of the virus. The center of gravity is the students themselves. As I may have mentioned, we haven't had a single documented case of a spread of the virus from student to faculty member or back. To my knowledge, the only documented case we have of students and staff contracting is because the students worked in close proximity in McClure Dining Hall with staff that had. Is that correct, David?
There was not transmission.
Not transmission, right? But they didn't get it, but they were, yeah, got it. And so what we see from observing the spread of the virus across our country and elsewhere are that when people are in close proximity in living conditions, that's when it really spreads. So whether in nursing homes, on cruise ships, family clusters at weddings, those sorts of things. It is much less likely in sort of a professional setting when everybody's masked, 6 feet apart and all this sort of stuff, but much more likely if, say, a parent is giving their daughter or son a hug, they're spending an awful lot of time together in close proximity. That student then goes back to her dorm or back to his fraternity house. They're in close proximity because they're not masked when they're in a house together, and then they're off to the races. And so now the other question is, well, you're testing everybody anyway, so why can't we come visit? And the short answer is that the testing helps us to have visibility as closely, as quickly as you can, but we've also seen how this thing can take off. The President of the United States of America contracted this virus on the most secure 12 acres of land, the White House compound on the planet, as did so many other people that were there. That's not a political statement one way or the other. It's simply showing how quickly this thing can take off, even in an environment where there is substantial testing and surveillance. And so I completely understand the sacrifice. I understand how eager you are to see your student. You will have a robust 2+ months with them when they get home for winter and Christmas break. But please understand, we aren't doing this to be cruel or simply to be mean. This is what our best understanding and observation of the science tells us is absolutely necessary in order to keep us safe. And then I know there are a couple of other questions with regard to what graduation is going to look like in terms of parties and families attending and all sort of stuff. Again, we are going to be guided by what the dictates of public health require for dealing with this virus. I would love nothing more than for everybody to be able to gather and by the thousands and party all weekend and celebrate. I don't know yet, as I sit here, how that is safely possible until we're on the other side of this pandemic. I certainly understand that all of you have plans to make and whatnot to organize, and so we're going to work very hard to try to help you understand and get you an answer as quickly as we can. But also, please understand that we are going to do our best to be flexible in the context of what the dictates of the science tells us we need to do. So are there any other things that that are not really answered?
There's a few, we can follow up with some of these that we didn't get to that are a little more specific. But anyway, I agree with you. I just am so happy that the families can be reunited after November 20th, and we just hope they have a wonderful time together. But we'll see if we can plan another one of these before then and answer more of your questions. And like I said, we'll follow up with some of these things that we've had a lot of feedback on and get some more clarity. I appreciate everybody being here. Y'all have a great night.
Great. Thank you all. Take care now. Bye-bye.